You know that making difficult decisions, just as that word would say, is not easy. They're decisions that will cost you so much. They may cost you emotionally, cost you financially, cost you socially, or even spiritually if you're a spiritual person. They're very difficult decisions to make. Before you make them, you always have to know, is it worth it? And so this week we've been talking about that on Wisdom Moments on K24 with me, C.J Atemo, talking about making difficult decisions. I talked about consultation, that before you make decisions, talk to people, listen to people, observe, ask questions, read, hear, gather statistics, data, information, but also make sure that your information comes from credible sources. You cannot go by everything that is in the grapevine, neither can you just pick cliches everywhere and use them for decisions that are going to affect you way down into the future. Then I did talk about clarity, that once you have gathered that information by consultation, you need to have certain level of clarity. Nobody will make the decisions for you. You have to eventually come up with the path that you need to follow, that clarity. The clarity that makes you go home and you know that the decision that you made was the best based on the circumstances that you had. That if you're given another opportunity, you would still make the same decision. Going home knowing that anybody else, given the same options, would make the same decision. When you have that clarity, and I talked about courage, that only courageous people make difficult decisions. The truth is, only courageous people make any kind of decision. A lot of people are indecisive. They fear what they will lose. When you choose one thing, you lose another thing. When you choose one person, you probably will lose somebody else. You cannot have your cake and eat it. You cannot have everything in life. Decisions eliminate certain options. So when you decide that you're going to pursue a certain career, you probably have said no to other careers. If you decide that you're going to marry somebody, you have said no to certain other people. When you decide to take up a job and you had 7 offers, it means that you have closed the door on the other 6 and they have to find their options. It takes courage to do that. But then, even as you make decisions and you're courageous about them, there's something that I need you to think about. The number 4C is consideration. This is what brings a human face and a human touch to the decisions that you've got to make. You may be making a right decision, but then there are ways you can do that without necessarily hurting people so much. Obviously, there will always be collateral damage, but that damage can be minimized. Even in spaces where people are at war, they always seek to minimize the damage. They try to find ways to keep mortality very low. Some years ago, quite some number of years ago, the US invaded Somalia because they needed to deal with the terrorists that were in there, the Al-Qaeda. But then the Al-Qaeda militants found a way with a human shield. So they took the civilians and protected themselves using the civilians. That meant that the US could not have their airstrikes, which is their biggest way and most effective way of disabling any other threat. Anywhere that they go, they probably and mostly will use the airstrikes and then come on the ground combat. But then because of the civilians, the US could not do that. So they had to get onto the difficult terrain of Somalia and try to disarm Al-Qaeda. Well, those who know that the US was humiliated in Somalia just because they had to take into consideration the civilian population. If they had just decided that all they wanted was to wipe out Al-Qaeda and they did not care, and so they had courage, they already had done consultation, they had their data, they were clear about wiping out Al-Qaeda, and because of courage they decide, let's bomb Somalia, they would probably have killed more civilians than the Al-Qaeda themselves. The reason they needed to preserve themselves was because there were other people involved. When you're making difficult decisions, ask yourself, who else is involved? Is there another way for us to make that decision? How do we lower the cost of that particular decision? Is there a way that we can protect people? Should we, for example, if that decision has got to do with transitions and things like the laying off of people, or how do we go about it? Should we stagger it? Should we stretch the time? I once talked about change, and I said that sometimes for you to manage change, you have to elongate the time and the period of that transition. So should we find another way? How do we get this thing to be done without hurting people? Because even as you make decisions, you are not trying to hurt people. You are either trying to help somebody or improve something, trying to save something, or you are trying to preserve something. You want to save a marriage. You want to save money. You want to build a company and grow it. You want to help a community. You are more focused on the positive that you want than the negative. You're not just going out there to make decisions in the thought that I want to go there and prove a point and I just want to hurt these people. See, even with the case that I mentioned about Somalia, the US was not coming into Somalia primarily to hurt anybody. They were trying to keep the world a safer place, and they had seen that the pockets of terror were strongly in Somalia. Remember, they'd been in war way back in Iraq and in Kuwait, and around the years 2001, 2003, around that period, they'd gone into the Desert Storm. So all they were trying to do was to keep the world a safer place. After 2001, September 11, everything changed. And so they would go into the spaces, but their mind was not necessarily to attack Somalia or to attack Iraq or somewhere else, but it was to try and have a safer place for humanity. So as you make these difficult decisions, you must have considerations. Is there a way that we can do this without necessarily coming out as mean? Is there a way that I can walk out of the deal without being disrespectful? Is there a way that people can end a relationship and a marriage without having to drag each other and their dirty linen to social media? Is there a way that you can get your grievances attended to without necessarily being malicious? Is there a way that you can shed off your workforce without being inhuman? Is there a way that justice can be served without the people feeling that they are being oppressed? When you begin to take into consideration some of these things, then you will put a human face and touch even when you are making courageous decisions. Let it always be known that the decision was about something that needed to be done. As it is always said, it's nothing personal. It's just business. But even business is about people. And people have souls and hearts. So even as you do that, have consideration on the environment, on relationships, on the finances, on the feelings, on what the impact will be on other people. There are times when I have felt that I needed to make certain decisions. Then I thought about the people that would be affected, and I had to either delay or change, because difficult decisions must be made with great consideration. This is C.J Atemo, and these have been Wisdom Moments on K24. Till the next time, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, C.J Atemo, and follow me on all social media platforms, C.J Atemo.